Hi, everybody. Good. I was going to say good morning, but that doesn't work today. Good evening. I am Ellie. I am the park manager here at Fort Sisseton. As we go on the lantern tour tonight, I want you to enjoy the stories that we're going to present to you. We're going to kind of give you a different mix and a different feel of the stories. Normally, when we do this, we actually travel around to all the buildings, but we're in the middle of a pretty big storm right now, so it's not going to be as kosher as normal. So tonight, most of these ghost stories come from personal experience, from different people who worked at the fort. It goes since the fort's been a state park in 1959. What's interesting though is we even have some ghost stories that we've been told from previous times and things like that. Now, what you got to remember is the fort has been around for 156 years, and we like to keep it that way. So we're going to go back into time in a sense. Our storyteller is Basil Knable, and he's gonna kind of keep it from the time period. Now, if you think about it, 156 years is a lot of time, and it's full of history. And you think of it, history in our eyes here at the fort is kind of like a ghost. It is as dead as it is alive. And depending on how much we want it to be alive, depends on how much alive it will be. And Fort Sisseton's history never stopped. It continues on today with the State Historical Park, but it didn't start that way. Before it was a fort, it was a land where Indians would hunt. This is where they would raise their families, they camped, they gave birth to new life, loved ones died, there's burial mounds here, and everything. And what's interesting is for the Native Americans, the land belonged to Mother Nature and nobody owned it. Then you have fur traders who came in, they made peace, they married the daughters, and they gave birth to other Native Americans. But the world around them was changing quite a bit. Now you remember, 1862 is a very drastic year with change. There's broken promises that lead to starvation, anger, and then eventually leads to our massacres and uprisings in Minnesota and Wisconsin in 1862. By the end of the uprising, you need to remember that almost 2,000 women and children are killed. And because of this, 38 Native Americans were hung because of these massacres. Now, because of all this, 1862, there's a cry for protection and from the pioneers, and that is where it was heard and the fort system was created, with Fort Sisseton being one of those forts. Now, it is said that during the day, most of us don't believe in ghosts, but at night we're a little bit more open-minded. So tonight, as we go and tell you these ghost stories of the fort, I want you to keep your eyes and your ears and your mind open. For you see, this fort was home to thousands of men and women and children who were just trying to make a living. Either they were a laundress, or they were a blacksmith, or a carpenter, or an enlisted soldier, or even a maid. The fort gave life to the prairies in the 1860s and never really stopped. It gave life in the 1900s as a hunting lodge and a cattle ranch. And then in 1930s, it was a WPA camp during the Great Depression, allowing men to actually feed their families. And then in 1960s and the early 2000s, it was a workplace for inmates from Sioux Falls. The fort is always alive, you guys. It is alive with visitors, it is physical, it is spiritual, and we share our physical lives with those in the spirit. For those, life, like love, really never dies if you think about it. So now follow me as we meet our storyteller, who is going to tell us the ghosts of the past and also share with us stories that we personally have encountered. I'd like to introduce to you guys Mr. Basil Knable.
Good evening. We're going to take a virtual journey around our fort. Starting, we're going to talk about each building and some of the ghost encounters or unexplained events that have happened here. Let's start with our North Barracks. Our North Barracks is also, it was one of the first buildings that was built here. It's also where our offices are currently. Delane, who is our regional state park secretary, will always hear the footsteps of soldiers' boots walking in the North Barracks and on the boardwalk in the morning. She said that sometimes doors open and close, but no visitor appears. We also know a story of a soldier who drank too much, and he was found dead in his bunk. Now, what's neat is the bunks that were created for the soldiers here at the fort were wide enough so that 2 soldiers could sleep on the top and 2 soldiers on the bottom. Imagine being the bunkmate of that soldier in the morning. We have a little boy that's been seen around the fort quite often. Some people have caught a glimpse of him out of the corner of their eyes, or they've felt the presence. We have one lady that said she felt like a child was holding her hands. We had a ghost investigation last year, and there was 2 ladies that were partaking in the ghost investigation. They were both teachers, and they were both grandmothers. Now, the 2 ladies, they sat next to each other on a bench. The one lady said her right leg went cold and she felt as though somebody was sitting on it. The other lady was sitting to the right of her and she felt her left leg go cold and as though somebody was sitting on it. They had the same experience at the same time. Now, as I said, staff have felt a little child holding their hands. Their hands will go cold and they'll feel as though somebody's sitting there, or holding it and walking with them, I should say. Another story actually that happened to me. I was walking across the fort at dark one night, and out of the windows, I saw a little boy looking. I looked back, and he was gone. Now, also in our that window was in our North Barracks. There's been, when you walk across the fort at night, if there is light in the North Barracks, a soldier has been seen standing or walking in the bunk room. Another soldier has been seen sitting on the bottom bunk, just as somebody would, leaning forward. Staff were working in the mess hall in the North Barracks, putting together an exhibit. And they felt as though someone was watching them. We're not sure if it was the boy or if it was somebody else. But the uneasiness of somebody watching them, but nobody being there, was very apparent. Now, next to the mess hall is what we call the sergeant's room. It's at the end of the bunk room. 2 different stories have happened in that space. The first one is that staff were in a meeting in the sergeant's room, and the door was open. And an unexplained figure leaned into the doorway to see what was happening in the room. Upon investigation, no one else was in the building, and the doors to the North Barracks were locked. Just a couple weeks ago, Allie and myself were working on recording a script for our walking tour that we have from the diary of Sergeant Andrew Fisk. And as we were finishing recording for the day, the doorknob rattled. So we said, "Come in," expecting it to be Delane, our secretary, or someone else. When we opened the door, no one was there. We looked around. There was no one there. South of our North Barracks is a building aptly named the South Barracks. The South Barracks was also a building to house soldiers when it was built. There was a storm during our festival a few years ago. And during that storm, a family's tent blew over. So our park manager invited the family to just take their sleeping bags and go into the South Barracks for the night. In the morning, when the family was asked how they slept, the parents said, "The kids slept great, thanks to the music you left on. We did not sleep very well. We were looking for the music to turn it down, but couldn't find where it was." Our park manager then asked, "What music? I didn't leave any music on." Music has been heard before in the South Barracks. This is a building we believe some stag dances happened in back in the day as well. Figures have even been seen dancing here. There was a volunteer working in our South Barracks setting up the stage for a play many years ago. It was a warm day, so she had the doors open. And out of the doors, looking west towards the building we're in right now, the officers' quarters, it was getting late, and she saw a figure up in the windows, going from window to window. So she stopped and she looked. And there it was, a lady in white with a candle in her hands. Also in the South Barracks, this lady in white has been known to walk across the stage. We also have an alarm system in our buildings. And during a wedding reception, the alarms started going off. I got a phone call and was asked to come figure out why the alarms were going on. I checked the alarm panel. All systems were okay. I talked to Allie. She had no alarms. We called the alarm company. No alarms. So finally, something did pop up in the system, and it said there was something like a motion on the back door, as though somebody opened a door that was armed. There is no motion detector on that door. And how the system told us that there was motion on the northeast door, we don't know to this day. The alarm company has been here a few times to try and figure out our bugs, and they keep telling us, it's like you have ghosts. Now we're going to travel south and a little west of our South Barracks, where our guardhouse is. The guardhouse was where the guards, of course, had their guard duty, but also where they housed the jail. Now, seasonal staff has gone to lock the building at night. It has a padlock on it, so you have to lock it from the outside. The jail cells are in the back, and there's a door between the guardhouse and the jail, and then there's 2 jail cells that each have a door. What's really neat is that we, like I said, we padlock it from the outside. So we go in every night and we make noise so that if somebody's in there, they hear and they know to come out before we padlock the building. Well, as kind of a joke, when we lock that building especially, we say, "Good night." And then in the morning when we open it up, we always say, "Good morning." Well, one particular night when it was locked, the staff member said, "Good night," noticed that all the doors were open, life was good. The next morning, that same staff member came in to open the door and unlocked the padlock, opened the door, and said, "Good morning," was cut off mid-sentence because they noticed the doors were shut. Now, the door that goes between the guardhouse and the jail is very heavy, and it scrapes the floor. Kind of unexplainable how that could have happened. Now, many years ago, different prisoners from the state system have been out here to help work. 2 different occasions that we know of for sure. The first time they came out here, they actually used the south side of the fort as the main entrance. And there was a guard out here who was watching prisoners, and he went to use the payphone that was located on the south side of the fort. This is the days before cell phones. And as he was using the phone, we believe he was calling back to the state penitentiary for information and to exchange statuses. And when he was on the phone, somebody tapped him on the shoulder. So he turned around and he came face to face with a Buffalo Soldier. How unique that it would have been a Buffalo Soldier. They were a group of soldiers that were here for just a few years in the later years of the fort. Now, as we continue further down the way, we pass our adjutant's office, which seems to be a peaceful building, and not many good stories have come from there. But our officers' quarters, the very building we're in right now, One very, very good story is, if you think about it, the officers who came out here, their wives left pretty much civilization to come out here. And they were very particular about their homes and their stuff because it's the one thing they could really control. Well, they really cared about how clean their home was and who cared for it. This was quite evident when the fort was being restored in the late 1980s and early 1990s. Lori Skadson, who is currently our district park manager and also the manager at Roy Lake, was working on cleaning the south apartment where we're at when the doors to the parlor and the bedroom suddenly slammed shut and locked. Now, these doors can only be locked from the inside. She looked up and spoke to whomever it was and said something effective, if we're not cleaning it good enough, just open the doors and we'll leave. Figures have been seen in the windows of this building, walking down the stairs and around in the second story, even when visitors are here. During another lantern tour, everyone had blown out their lanterns. Now, the officers' quarters where we're at all of a sudden lit up in this south apartment, as though somebody turned on the lamps again. There's no electricity in this building. The only light we have in here is these lanterns we've brought in. So there's very little explanation as to how or why that happened. To the north of us is the commanding officer's quarters. The commanding officer's quarters stands straight in the middle of the fort with a very prominent porch and a very prominent door facing the parade grounds. Pretty apt for the commanding officer to be able to stand on his steps and survey his charges. Now, we've mentioned the lady in white. She's been seen in the South Barracks, as we mentioned, on the stage and other places. She's been seen here in the officers' quarters from the windows upstairs, as our volunteers saw, as viewed from the South Barracks. The lady in white is seen most often in our commanding officers' quarters. Now, again, with a candle in hand, she goes from window to window quite often. There was a young girl camping at Fort Sisseton one year, and she had heard the story of the lady in white. And she begged her dad. She said, "Daddy, please, please, Daddy, can we sit out and wait for her?" And the dad couldn't say no. So they brought their chairs, sat out in the middle of the parade grounds by our flag, and they waited. Well, about 2 o'clock that morning, the dad was awakened from the little girl, shaking him, saying, "Daddy, Daddy, there she is." And sure enough, there in the windows of the commanding officer's quarters was our lady in white. We mentioned our senior secretary, Delane. Now, we're going to talk about her husband, Galen. Galen has always told us that we're full of it, that we don't know what we're saying, that there is no such thing as ghosts. Galen and a friend of his were walking down the boardwalk from this building to the north to the office just past the commanding officer's quarters. And a lady with a very Victorian white dress walked by him. And this was actually the weekend of our festival many years ago, but it was on the Friday night, not the Saturday night when we have the grand ball. So Galen found it quite unusual that somebody would be dressed that well on Friday night. So he tapped his buddy and he said, "Who was that?" They turned around. No one was there. Galen has admitted he's now a believer. Also in the commanding officer's quarters, we had some ghost investigators here last fall. And one of them had a hat on. And I'm told it said, "Proud Veteran." Well, he walked in and went into the room that is the commanding officer's office. And within a few moments, the hat flew off his head as though somebody beat it off of him and went going across. That is definitely a way to get attention. And of course, if you or I would go into a commanding officer's office, we would remove our hat as a sign of respect. So this gentleman was reminded of his respect and his duties as a soldier. During a tour that was entering the commanding officer's quarters, one of our employees opened the door and they said you could see an officer figure at the back of the hallway kind of dart into the dining room as though they were trying to get away. When they walked to the back, no one was there. Now, the commanding officer's quarters is a very, very stoic and prominent building. It has 3 stories to it. The first floor is the parlors and the offices and the dining room. The second floor is the main bedrooms. The third floor was servants' quarters. Now, on that third floor, we have windows that face the north and face the south. The windows that face the north, which would overlook our doctor's residence, our hospital, our blockhouse, and our wonderful stone barn, sometimes a lady can be seen watching over the grounds. I mentioned our doctor's residence. Now that is to the north of the commanding officer's quarters. And following the restoration we did between the fall and winter, spring of 2018, 2019, various things have happened there. We've heard the alarm system going off, but no alarms being alerted to the control panel or the company. What's interesting about this alarm system is if it goes off in one place, it goes off in all the places. At least that's the way it's set up. Now, as I said, the alarm company's been back here a few different times, and all systems are working properly. They have no explanation as to why an alarm will go off and there will be no indicator. During a ghost investigation, as the group was getting ready to leave, the alarms were going off. And the question was asked, well, if you don't want us to leave, will you shut the alarms off? And the alarm shut off right away. Many guests who enter our commanding officers, or excuse me, our doctor's residence, become sick and lightheaded, as though something in that building's making them not feel well. But when they go outside, or they enter another building, they feel fine. What? To see him. Oh. Okay. Our hospital is located just to the north and east of the doctor's residence. A volunteer was spending the night in the Fort Hospital one time as just a place to lay their head, and they were bugged all night by a ghost. A volunteer was sleeping in a room in the hospital and woke up with a soldier bending over, looking at them like this in the bed, like, what are you doing here? What's going on? Doors have been found open in the morning in our hospital when we've checked and double-checked the night before to make sure they are locked. Outside of the fort proper is where our barn is located, just to the north side. We've seen a little boy at weird times in the barn, especially in the part of the barn that's been remodeled as our comfort station where the showers and bathrooms are. One story is that some people saw him sitting on a bench out in the hallway, and they went into the bathroom. When they came back out, he was gone. Staff has shut the lights off in the hayloft many times. And when they leave for the day, the lights are off. They come back in the morning, they go to open the barn, and why are the lights on? And the discussion goes back and forth. Were you up there? Well, no. Were you up there? Well, no. No explanation. We have a library schoolhouse. And in our library schoolhouse, during the days of the fort, of course, there's 3 parts to the building. The main part was the classroom, the schoolhouse. There was a room to the west side that was the library, where people would read books, check up on the latest news, things like that. And the small room to the east was the court-martial room. And now, over the years, that building has served many different purposes, including as a caretaker's house, a park manager's house, and in the early 2000s, it was used to house the prisoners that came, the second wave of prisoners that came from the state penitentiary to do restoration work. Now, these prisoners were called trustees because they were minimum security, but also were close to the end of their sentence, and their crimes were not major crimes. We had guards that worked with them during the day, and then a guard that would watch over them at night. One of the guards that was watching them at night had been watching TV, and that guard was supposed to stay awake, but dozed off and woke up all of a sudden because a figure of the small boy was in there. And all of a sudden, the TV crashed to the floor. Now, there was another payphone at this time of the fort located on the north side between the library, schoolhouse, and the barn. And the prisoners could use it to talk to their families every night for a short time. Well, one of the prisoners, trustees as they called them, was talking to his wife on the payphone. And when he came back to the little building, he wouldn't talk to anybody. He was all shook. And when it was time to, they'd go back to Sioux Falls for the weekend. But when Monday morning came and they were to report for their duty to come up here to work, he refused. And even when he was told, fine, if you don't want to go work, you're going to have to spend time in solitary confinement, he gladly took it. So what he saw, we're not 100% sure. There was a park manager who used to live in this building, like I said, and children were seen and heard running around with his own children even. Quite neat. Now, one of the children that lived there told the story that they saw a soldier on a horse riding around the parade grounds. And upon further investigation, no horse was found. No soldiers were found. Quite interesting. We have a cemetery, as most places would, of course. Now, there's a story told of when they were removing the bodies to move them to Little Bighorn National Cemetery, a soldier slipped into a coffin and was supposedly grabbed. These are just a few of the stories of different unexplainable encounters that have happened out here. We're told many times that at Fort Sisseton, history lives on. None of these encounters, other than maybe the grabbing in the graveyard, have been anything of a malicious intent. Most of them seem to be as though those who lived their life out here, whether it was during the days of the frontier outpost, the hunting lodge, the cattle ranch, or further on, are just living their life as though it still continues on. They show interest in what's going on, and at times, it's nice to feel as though you're not alone. I thank you for your time with me this evening, telling stories. And I'm going to turn it over to Olli.
All right. I'm going to grab a couple of the lanterns.
Absolutely.
Hey, you guys, you're going to go with me. We're going to go ahead and take a tour of some of the buildings. Just so you know, there is no electricity in any of these buildings. So all we have for lights is the lanterns that we can actually carry and the keys. So I actually have been part of the ghost investigation teams that have been coming out here. We have, I'm not catching fire, am I? Okay. Nope. We have the Minnesota Paranormal Group that comes out here. They come out and investigate. They've now done it twice. And what they do is we do more private with them to see more of what they can get and things like that. So we'll tell some of their stories. It's been very fascinating. And then over Labor Day weekend, we actually do a fundraiser for the fort. And what it is we go and we actually allow the public to go on the ghost investigation and to see what they get. And we've had some pretty good success stories with that. So we're going to go ahead and head over to our commanding officers where some of our most important stories have been. I am trapped. By the way, you guys, I don't know how they did this in hoop skirts. So, okay. So the commanding officers, probably our most prominent one that we had was commanding officer Captain Bennett, who, Basil, you want to grab another lantern just in case? Thanks. Who kind of was here and he really helped with the history of the fort in the sense of he really built it up. He was one who was here the longest. He's the one that built in the telegraph, the telephone into this place. He educated his soldiers. He demanded that they understand the arts and the world around them. And so sometimes we think it's Captain Bennett who is actually in our building still, commanding the things. There's been multiple stories where people will open a building and he open up the commanding officer's house and they will actually see him standing there. There's been times where we got done with a lantern tour and you could actually see him standing with a candle actually in the windows and things like that. It's very fascinating because like he said, there is no electricity in these buildings. There is no lights or nothing like that. That window right up there, I'm so glad that the storm stopped. That was kind of why we had to do what we did, you guys. That window up there is where the lady in white is actually seen very much with a candle.
with burning off the bed bugs and things like that that happened in the 1870s. They burnt thousands of bed bugs because they were crawling all over this house. That's what we think she's doing. We think she's a servant, just due to the way she's dressed and stuff like that. And she is the one that people can actually see very much at 2:30 in the morning. We're going to go ahead into the commanding officers. Do realize that we're in the middle of restoration. So about a year ago, I think it is. Yeah, about a year ago, we started restoring our buildings back to the 1800s and actually getting it to what it used to look like. So we actually stripped floors. We started stripping the old non-traditional paints and things like that. And so what's interesting is ever since we started restoration between here and the doctor's residence, we've had a lot of increased activity. This is the room that we were actually standing during the ghost investigation with the Minnesota team. And we were standing here and we still had some of the artifacts actually in here. Can they see me okay? Oh, sorry, it's dark. Welcome to our world. We're in the dark. So we have the artifacts actually in this room. And what happened, you guys, is we're standing here, and one of the ghost investigators was actually an Army veteran, and he was wearing a hat that said "Proud to be an Army veteran." Very nice guy. And anybody who is a veteran knows when you walk into a commanding officer's office, you immediately remove the hat that had a sign of respect. So there's 5 of us standing here, all in front of the commanding officer's desk. And the next thing we know, his hat goes flying off and flies out in the hallway. And what's interesting about this story is that what happens afterwards. We had a recorder in here listening to just, on record and stuff like that, listening. And I jokingly said, "Do you want Al to leave?" That was his name. And on the recorder you hear, "Get the hell out of here, soldier." Right after I jokingly answer that. So Al leaves out of this building because he just didn't feel right after the hat incident and stuff. And we continued our investigation here, going up to the 2nd floor where you could actually see the rocking chair just moving, even though nobody was standing next to it. We even jumped on the floor and everything. It was crazy. And we left eventually. And when we did, we forgot the recorder that we had sitting on the desk. And as soon as we left, and you can hear us leave, the door lock, and you can hear everything, the recorder kept going until it's that morning. And on there was so much. You could hear somebody grumbling. You can hear somebody, it sounds like a pen quill going across the paper, from what I understand, as if he's still writing. And you could hear somebody talking in the process. So this is ever since we started restoration, especially in this building, with the different paintings and the walls and the textures and the floors, activity has really increased in this one, especially when we do our investigations and things like that. So if you're into it, definitely come on out for this one. It's quite interesting, but it's our commanding officers. We hope to have this open up to the public sometime soon, so that way people can actually see it and things like that. So this is the commanding officers. We'll kind of go through, not much to see in here because we don't really have the artifacts and things like that. Ouch, that was getting a little warm. But this would have been his library, the officer's library. We do have the original 1800s oak floors that the soldiers put in the 1800s. We do have the original staircase. And what's neat is, you guys, if you can get here during when we're open, you can actually see where it is warped and things like that. So it's kind of neat. I'm trying to show you guys. Sorry. Welcome to Buildings Without Electricity. But you can kind of see where it's warped and stuff. So what's interesting about these stairs, I'll put my light down so you guys can see it, and maybe kind of see up the window where the lady in white is seen. What's interesting is when we have people in here, and especially when they were working and stuff like that, they would actually hear footsteps going up and down the stairs. Now, you must remember, you guys, that with these ghosts, some people's like, well, it's just people walking. Well, remember, the shoes were a lot different than what they used to be. They were not the same as now, so they make a completely different sound. All right, we're going to go into our next building, which is the doctor's residence. And what's interesting about the doctor's residence is, you lost me. So another thing that's interesting with the doctor's residence is actually it had a cellar. And what's interesting about the cellar is that when they actually had somebody die during the wintertime, there was no place to put them. So what they did is the doctor would actually sleep with the dead bodies inside of the cellar. And so unfortunately, when they were doing a dig in 94, I think it was, they actually found bones in that cellar. So it's quite interesting. So we're going to go ahead to the doctor's residence. So normally we would go into the hospital, but we do have, oh, it's raining again. We do have an employee who actually stays at night stays in our hospital, especially when he's working security. So we're going to miss that one. So now when we do our ghost investigations, especially with our the Minnesota team, we actually put out a lot of equipment. They have they do EVPs, they do video, they do photos, they do cameras, and then they have what they call white boxes, which allows for noise and things. And then they also have a grid. And there's a reason I bring up the grid. Now, when it comes to the grid, why he unlocks the door, the grid is, it's a laser grid, which is very interesting. And we were using it in the South Barracks. And when we did that, we were talking to people. And the grid, you could actually see a soldier's outline walk back and forth in between the window and the door and stuff like that. So it was quite fascinating to actually see it. Okay, I apologize, we don't have much light, but we'll see what we can do for you here in the doctor's residence. Okay. Plus then we can get out of the rain for you guys. Whew. Nope, you're good. It's just my dress. I seriously sometimes wonder how. So we have a little bit more light thanks to the windows and stuff like that. Time period accurate keys. So one of the things is when we did our ghost investigation, it was actually the one for the public. It got really fascinating in here because we had multiple people get sick in this building, not feeling good, just lightheaded and dizzy. And what's interesting is one of the people that was with us was actually was a detective at one time. And it's known that ghosts have a tendency to draw more towards medical people, nurses, paramedics, EMTs, police officers, firefighters, you name it, people that are there to help. Anyways, this lady was a detective, and she was standing actually right here with her husband, and she actually felt really, really sick to her stomach, and then her husband started feeling really, really sick. I'll let you go ahead and give two of the rooms, because I'm sure they could see a little bit in this one. And so her husband started feeling really, really sick too. And we left. They left, and they felt just fine as soon as they actually left the building. And then a couple of other people in another group felt same illness right here in this living room area. They felt sick again too. So it was quite fascinating. The other thing that's interesting with this building is Dr. Knickerbocker. We actually were doing EVP recordings, and we asked what doctor was here. And now think about it, Knickerbocker is not a very common name. It's very hard to pronounce. And on the EVPs, when they were playing them back, and you can hear me say what doctor is here, you could actually hear them say, you could hear Knickerbocker in the recordings. So that was pretty cool with the Minnesota team. So we'll go ahead and kind of give you a tour of this building too. This one is the one we have problems. When we were doing our investigation, we said, okay, you're not talking to us anymore. We're gonna go ahead and say goodbye. And when we did that, the alarm system started going off. And what was interesting about the alarm going off is none of the other buildings were triggered. As the park manager, my phone gets the phone calls. That wasn't going on or anything. And so the deputy that was with us, he called his dispatch, and he asked them, kind of, hey, alarm's going off, what's going on there? And the dispatch didn't even know anything about the security alarm going off. So jokingly, I said, well, okay, if you want us to stay, shut the alarm off and we'll stay. And immediately the alarm shut off, so it was quite creepy. So, yeah, so we're gonna go ahead and go this way.
Holy crap, okay, sorry.
Our intern just walked out.
Oh my gosh, okay, I apologize, you guys. My interns just came up right behind us. As we're telling ghost stories, you're fired. All right, so more on the favorite part. I apologize. Wow. So yeah, so it's very common for things like that to happen in mysteries and things like that. So this is kind of also the bedroom. We started restoration in this building in, oh my goodness, the winter of 2019. And ever since then, we started having more issues and things like that. So, oh my gosh.
Somebody wanted to show up and made your heart skip a beat.
Yes, it did. Holy bucket. And I thought I saw somebody standing in the doorway, kind of over in the corner. And then I'm like, it's just my imagination. And then he started walking into the room. So, you're lucky I didn't drop my lanterns. Because my dress will go up fast. So, I apologize, you guys. I got to take a breath. My heart is racing right now. You're dead, Caleb. So,
is there high EMF in this specific area?
There is actually. More in the living room, we do get a lot of high EMF readings. In that corner by the fainting couch, we do get quite a bit. The other one that we actually get a lot of EMF readings is on the second floor of the officers' quarters, where we've gone up there and you watch somebody walk down the other side. I've been locked in that building. That sucked. It was negative 10 degrees out, and I was in there. I said, hey, I'm here to take some pictures. Don't worry about me. And the door slammed shut. The brick went flying across the room, and the door slammed shut. And he locked me in there. The worst part about it is I didn't have my winter clothes on because I was just taking a couple pictures. And so my employees had to come rescue me and stuff like that. So that was a good 30 minutes of the cold in that building. So. This is the doctor's personal office / his office / where he would have an exam room for the officers and things like that. So again, people just kind of feel ill and sick and things like that in this building. We're going to go ahead, since Caleb's with us, he's the one that sleeps here, we're going to go ahead and go to the hospital now, probably one of our most haunted buildings besides the North Barracks. In the sense of this is very active, very much by our campground people due to a lot of different things. Caleb, since you're here, you can hold the lantern. Please come. Put you to work now. Y'all, this is Caleb, the one that's here to do that.
Hi.
Okay. So, what's really kind of neat about this building is you have the hospital ward and everything. And and our campground is literally just right over there, you guys. And so at night, people will see of course now that Caleb's living there, but prior to Caleb living there, there would be candlelight, which is completely different than electricity. Again, this building doesn't have any lights in it. There's no electricity. And you would see back in the matron's, kind of her bedroom area, which is back here, which faces the campground, you would see candlelight actually moving back and forth. When we were doing our investigation in here, we were sitting in the front room, and we'll go into, and we got some really good voices, scared the dickens out of us at that time. So let's go ahead and go inside, out of the rain. So the hospital had a few renovations. It was a one-story hospital with a dirt floor. One-story hospital with a dirt floor, and who would have? And they finally realized about 1870s, 80s that dirt floor is not good for anybody. So they finally built us this two-story hospital.
We are missing a wing off of it due to the weight of a fireplace collapsed it. So let's go ahead and go inside. I'll tell you some of my first. Okay, so.
Do we know how many acres are inside the fort area proper?
I think it's, I don't remember honestly. I apologize. I know that we have about 260 acres total between here and over where our cemetery is, but I honestly don't know inside the fort proper, so I apologize for not knowing that.
And we don't currently have any EVPs that are able to be shared.
Not right now, no. The Minnesota team has them, and they are coming back. So they will actually be coming back in sometime in October to do a public one where they will also be sharing everything that they have found for evidence and things like that. So I don't have any on me right now. I do have some in my email. So if you are interested in some of the EVPs and pictures, email Fort Sisseton at state.sd.us and we will get them sent to you. But, or you can ask Thea too for my personal email and we'll send them to you.
And how do you get information for the public ghost investigation?
The public one, best way to do that is our Facebook page. Our Facebook page, we don't have it on there quite yet because we're just hammering out the details. Because if things happen the way we're hoping, we actually have a really cool surprise for that, along with the Minnesota group. So Facebook is one of the best ways to find out anything that we are doing and stuff like that. So.
And Lori Nelson, if there is a Lake City, South Dakota paranormal, please call the fort and talk to Allie.
I am actually, yes, please do. We are actually, I am actually the historian for the Minnesota Paranormal Society group now. I actually do all their research for their buildings and anything, any investigations that they do. And my daughter, who is the one recording, actually is part of their investigation team. They do allow a junior investigator, so it's pretty cool on the team. So we actually are doing also an investigation, junior investigation for a ghost investigation in October for like kids 8 years old to I think it's 17 or 18. So that's also kind of neat too.
What's the Facebook page?
Fort Sisseton Historic State Park is our Facebook page. So one of the best ways.
And Caleb, you said you've got one good encounter in the hospital?
Yes.
Okay, we're gonna turn it over to Caleb. Caleb lives here, you guys. He has to sleep upstairs, so.
Every once in a while, I will shut the doors and then walk back down the stairs and they're open again. And
Yeah.
like these doors aren't easy to open yet. Slam them shut and they'll open back up.
So when he was talking about the volunteers that had to sleep here overnight, we actually, they would sleep in here. Oh yeah, you're good. They would actually sleep in here on these bunks. And when he got in here, he has never volunteered again here. At least never volunteered to sleep in here again after this happened. When he said he was standing over him, the ghost was leaning like this right by his face, just staring at him. And the volunteer has never come back and slept here ever again. So this room, when we were doing our ghost investigation, we actually had the 5 of us out here because we were kind of tired by the time we got to this building. And the investigator, his name was Al, was sitting in here, and he had his recorder, and we put it over there by the doctor's desk. And we're sitting there, and he goes, "Who's there?" And I said, "What do you mean?" He goes, "Well, there's somebody tapping over here." And I said, "We're all over here against this wall and stuff." And he's like, "No, it's tapping." He goes, "Is anybody over here?" And it's really neat because on the recording, "I'm here." The doctor was responding like, "I'm here, can't you see me?" So that was kind of neat. The other thing we've had people say when they're in here is they do hear footsteps upstairs. Of course, this is before Caleb, pre-Caleb as we call it, it's our pre-Caleb time.
PC.
We do have footsteps. You hear people going up and down. We've heard stories of doors being open. In fact, these doors are really hard to lock and shut and everything, like they were saying. And we've come to work in the morning and you would have the door wide open multiple times, but yet the security system's not going off or anything like that. It was kind of crazy. So you never knew. So we're gonna go ahead and walk this way. I'll let Jordan go ahead and get in front a little bit or catch up with me. So we do have the doctor's office. We did have over 50-some men die here at the hospital. Due to typhoid,
freezing to death. In fact, consumption was another big one that we had. It was very common for us to have coffins actually on site, and if you did not fit in the coffin, what they did is they would chop your arms or your legs off to make you fit into the coffin. So that is actually a typical coffin that they would have had here. The other thing that's interesting is we do have actually the surgical tools that were used by the actual surgeon here to remove the bullets and to saw off and amputate their arms and legs and things like that. So that might be one reason why you can also hear screams sometimes out of this hospital building and things like that. So
I spent time in that coffin.
yeah, Basil slept in the coffin.
Wow. 15 minutes while we were doing a ghost investigation.
Another quick story about the doctor's residence. I felt so bad for my daughter, my youngest middle one. She's 9, 10. And we were in the doctor's residence. Oh, I feel so bad. I love this. Lay on me. We were in the doctor's residence. And we were given actually another tour to a group in Iowa. And the door slammed shut. That poor child screamed so loud. And we couldn't get her to calm. She actually has not been to the fort since that has actually occurred. So we're going to go ahead and go into, all right, we're going to go this way so you guys can see more of the hospital. Again, this building became the hunting lodge that we talked about. So you'll see this area is a little different than what most typical hospitals look like and things like that. We got our buffalo. We have our we have our gunsmith history with being Star, who was actually the founder of our rendezvous, and things like that. So it's kind of neat. We do work in here. This is the building that holds all our artifacts. So that's one of the reasons it's probably also a little bit more busy now, is because we started restoration in this building, started turning into the floors, things like that, keeping them in original, but fixing it up. But this does host all our artifacts. So we do have like human hair jewelry. We do have human hair jewelry. We have hair from when people passed away and they would cut it. So we have little kids' hair, things like that. We have personal artifacts that people gave and things like that. So that could be one of the reasons they think that this building especially, not only was it because it was a hospital, and we also had what we call a limb pit outside, actually out this window over here, where all the limbs that they amputated, they would just throw into a pit. But it's also the artifacts and things like that. So there's a lot of possible reasons for this place to be haunted.
Now, before we continue, you see our telephone?
Oh. So
as far as letting people in buildings, we have to wait with COVID things.
Yeah, so did everybody hear that? So right now, we do allow people into almost all the buildings except for a handful because of the artifacts and trying to keep them sterilized and stuff because of COVID. But our goal is by August we're hoping that they will lift that restrictions and allow us to get back to normal, because we miss giving people tours of our artifacts and things like that. If you're interested in a tour, though, give us a call. We're pretty cool and we're pretty open to a lot of things. So, but Basil wanted to tell you about this one.
It's my obsession. This phone has become an obsession for me. Back in the 1920s, when the fort was being used as a hunting lodge, the gentleman who established the hunting lodge and used it the most was Colonel William Boyce, who founded the Boy Scouts. He had a lot of famous senators and congressmen out here. Clark Gable came to the hunting lodge here, as did William Ham, if you ever had a Ham's beer. And in the 1950s, our local telephone man, who was a historian on the side, hunted around to make sure the phone line was still here. And because of his efforts, we were named a state park. So that was kind of my research project last year and main obsession.
So we're going to go ahead and spend about an hour. So we're going to kind of finish up shortly, you guys. So that way, for those who want to get going, we're going to tell you one more kind of crazy story, but we're going to go back outside. So, yes, there is a lot of amazing things, you guys. A lot of great ghost stories, and more pop up every day because we've had more and more happen. Like I said, especially as we do restoration. But I want to stop right here. Actually, I don't need my lantern. Do you mind? I talk with my hands. When I taught college, people always made fun of me because I always talk with my hands. My girls do too. So actually, right here, you guys,
is what we had. It was a hanging tree. Of course, in the military, if you go AWOL and you're caught, you were usually hung. And of course, some of your crimes, if they were really horrible, you also were hung and things like that. Sorry, I guess I do need a lantern, or am I good? Okay, so right here, you guys, was our hanging tree. And we did hang about four soldiers total, the youngest one being 16 and the oldest one, I think was in his 20s or 30s, and all of them because they went AWOL and everything. What's interesting is this is actually the location of a couple of very significant events for our ghost. One of them is, a lot of times, this is where a little boy can be seen. It's the same little boy. We see him right here. This is also where the Buffalo Soldiers have been seen. And two of the people that were hung were African-American Buffalo Soldiers. And stuff, so they went AWOL. The other thing that's interesting is this is the path that the horse has been seen by 4 or 5 people. Now this horse, it comes across with a soldier on it, it's a cavalry guy, and he actually will start galloping, and he will go through the parade ground, and he will actually ride around the parade ground, and sometimes he goes out that way, or he comes right back through that window. And the reason I bring that one up is because I had only heard it once or twice, and you don't always believe it when you hear it the first couple times. But I have actually met 4 people now working here as the park manager who actually have seen this cavalry guy. I haven't yet. I'm hoping to. It'd be kind of cool, and stuff like that. So that is probably our coolest ghost that we have also, just because the cavalry is not seen by everybody compared to like the Buffalo Soldier and the little boy and stuff like that. If you do come out here, just heads up, the little boy does have a tendency to follow you back to your campground. He will not go to your cabin. He does not go into your camper, from what we've been told, and he doesn't go into your tent, but he will stand outside of it. He's been seen in the comfort station at 2, 3 in the morning. One gal has never gone camping since. Her husband talked her into come camping for the first time in her life. She hates the outdoors, and then she had to go to the bathroom at 2, 3 in the morning, and she saw the little boy, and she freaked out, made him pack his stuff up and go home. So she was not impressed with our ghost boy and stuff like that. So, but yeah, is there any more questions, you guys, as we head back to the officers' quarters, or is there any more things you guys want to know? We'll go ahead and put it in the chat. We'll go back to the officers. They, I think, Basil thinks he saw something. Oh, go ahead. Follow Basil.
Did you see anything?
Horrible.
In the chat, let us know if you saw something in this window. See anything in that window? Well,
Okay. There's some more in the chat.
that is kind of weird.
Do you know who the boy could be? A child or someone who worked at the fort?
So the thing that changes about the boy that's different than so we did have a couple children die here, but they were very young, 79 days old, a couple months old and stuff. But what's interesting about our cemetery is that when we closed down in 1889, they removed all the bodies of the soldiers and took them actually to Montana and buried at Little Bighorn Cemetery there. But what happened though is the pioneers actually started burying their family members and children at that cemetery because it is a marked located cemetery on all maps. And so unfortunately they used wood for their grave marks, and unfortunately a lot of them disintegrated. So we think he is a boy from the 1900s due to his clothing. He wears kind of a bowler hat. His clothes suggest about 1900s and not the 1800s, like
Knicker pants kind of thing.
yeah, kind of like knicker pants. So we think he's probably one of the pioneer children, because unfortunately there was kind of an epidemic that did go through in that time period, killing a lot of the children and stuff like that.
But he will not go into the guardhouse
He
or the
won't go
cemetery.
he won't go into the guardhouse. He won't go into the cemetery, but he will follow you. He's followed us during an investigation. You could actually see him. We had one gal who was a new mom, and he kind of attached himself to her. We think it's because of the maternal instinct and things like that.
up there is where you'll see her stick her head out and watch you sometimes. Not there tonight, but it's also pretty still bright and things like that. Usually when we do our lantern tours, we start them at 9:30, 10 o'clock at night, because it's a better chance of actually seeing something and having activity. I had a chuckle because we had a group that nothing happened. We told some great stories, nothing happened. And as we blew out our lanterns and stuff like that, the lights came on in the officers' quarters, candles lit, you name it, looked like. In fact, my camp host who lived behind the building, on the other side of the berm, actually thought that we were in there, but we were not. So, oh yeah.
There's something in that center window.
What?
There's something in that center window.
What is it?
I don't know.
Basil said that he saw something up in the center window, but not
It's
really.
not there
Do you
now.
offer scooter rentals?
We do not have scooter rentals here. We do have a wheelchair that you can use, but it has to be pushed. But we do have a wheelchair, and we are handicap accessible for 90% of the buildings. There's a couple of them more out in the grounds and stuff like that that have the boardwalk too that you can't get to as easy. But
And how many ghosts are there in total?
ooh, how many ghosts total? That's a great question. I would say our most common ones is Bennett, the little boy, the lady in white, the buffalo soldier, the cavalry. We have a couple of soldiers in that one. I say there's probably about 8 to 10 of them that we can actually name for sure. There's probably some other ones too that are in there that just aren't as seen as much. Captain Bennett. So it's probably one of our big ones too.
How many staff are licensed to take people on tours?
This year I only have 3 of us that are licensed to take tours. Caleb, Basil, and I are basically the only staff for that this year. Due to COVID, we had to cut down our staffing big time, but usually us 3 give the tours. So.
The bottom right corner.
Okay, you see it too now.
Yeah.
So Basil, I don't know if you can see it. Basil and Jordan is actually seeing activity on the 2nd floor. Does any of you guys wanted us to go ahead and go look?
No, it's okay. We'll let them be.
Oh, let's go. Does anybody, if you guys want us to, that are on Zoom?
Yes, go.
Okay.
Yes, please, go.
Okay, well, you guys are all going to owe us a soda after this because my guys are all like, all right, you got it?
Gosh.
They said it's right
I drink
up there.
Mellow Yellow if they want to send me a 12-pack.
They said it's up there.
Can I wait outside?
Okay, Jordan is requesting to wait outside, so bear with me because I'm going to take over. So, okay, you can go ahead and go with the light. Basil is scared. Yes. Are you sure you want to go by yourself?
I'll just stay in between.
Okay.
Yeah, no, I just want to let them be.
Okay, we're gonna do our best, you guys. We only have a couple lanterns now. Okay, Caleb, slow down, because we gotta. I gotta come in. Okay. Okay, here we go. Oops.
I was up here the night with the lady who straight by us.
Okay, I'm actually gonna take the microphone. You guys, we are in the COQ, so I'm gonna take our microphone out so you guys can maybe hear more too. Okay. So this is where we see the rocking and the lady in white, and this is the room that they were seeing stuff in. Fortunately, I don't really have a.
It's the fire hydrant.
Oh, is that all?
It's the fire hydrant.
Okay, so
Debunked.
debunked. Basil, tell them how you were debunking it.
Well, what we do when we debunk a ghost or we investigate, what you do is you look at your environment, and is there anything in that environment that could have caused the apparition or the sighting or the sound, the feeling? And I was getting something from this side of the window. Wasn't sure if it was somebody leaning into the window, what? Well, I didn't realize. There's a fire extinguisher sitting here.
Yeah,
It has
'cause
a
was-
shiny top, so as our lanterns were shining towards the window, we caught a little bit of it, so sorry.
That's okay. I bet they don't mind. So,
Jordis is relieved, I think.
Yes.
Jordis is excited that it was nothing. So that's good. Yes, it was thrilling. It was
Very exciting. So that's Jordan. She's our camera woman, by the way. She does this a lot. She's a junior investigator with the Minnesota Paranormal Group. So she's traveled to, they've been invited to Wisconsin and a couple other sites in Minnesota to actually investigate. So that's kind of neat. Minimum age to work for the state is 17. And I've been doing this for a couple of years. And I love it. What are some tips to ghost investigate? Patience, I would say. What would you say, Jordis?
Always being open to like people being there and ghosts being there, because you go in there expecting nothing to happen, and then something happens and you get too worked up and then you're scared, and then when things actually happen you don't see it, you don't realize it because you're too scared.
Yeah, and you
Keeping
really
emotions in check.
the other thing with ghost investigating, you guys, is 90% of the stuff you can debunk, like what we just did. And so go in with the mind of it's not haunted until you can prove that it's been haunted with evidence and things like that. As for, do we allow pets on tours? Pets are welcome, but they are not allowed in buildings. That's a state rule. But unless it is a certified service dog, then yes, they are welcome to come inside buildings. But what we've had people do is we've had people wait outside and stuff like that. We do lantern ghost investigation tours or ghost tours usually once a month, and then like 2-3 times in October is what we do for those. So Caleb, there you go, since you have a lantern. So all right, okay. The cost of the tours, the only cost of the tours, you have to have park entrance license. Otherwise we don't charge. Unless it's during the ghost investigation fundraiser, then it's like $50, but you get like 6 hours of ghost investigating with professionals, and they explain things, they go over equipment, things like that. So yeah, that is a great question. So, but otherwise, if you're just coming for a regular lantern tour, it's free, which is pretty cool. So.
And regular tours right now are by appointment.
Yes, regular tours, if you want to just come during the day, is by appointment. But our lantern tours, you can find out more about them online at our Facebook page. It's $50 per person, but we do where like you get a discount if it's you and somebody else. So we do discounts if you buy more than one spot. The fundraiser is over Labor Day weekend. So it's Friday, Saturday, and Sunday night. So, all right. Any other questions? Yes, it is so much better than person, you guys. It really is. It's neat. But this is just how we kind of have to do it right now because of COVID, unfortunately. So, but eventually we will be open so y'all can come on out here and do some ghost investigating with us. So.
Great place to start.
We thank you guys for everything. It was great.
Wonderful. Well, thank you for letting us do this, you guys. It's been fun. Yes, you do contact me for scheduling. Just call here at the fort, which is 448-5474. You can Google it and stuff like that. Just look up Fort Sisseton, ask for Allie. And somebody asked something else and I can't remember. Sorry. Yeah, contact me. And yes, during the day, we do see some ghosts. Usually it's a soldier or two that we'll see during the day.
The 2 stories from the sergeant's room were the meeting and the doorknob. Those both were definitely during the day.
They were during the day. So our North Barracks is more active during the day than most of the other buildings. So well, thank you guys for everything.
Thank you.
Junior investigation will be most likely in October for those who are asking about that. So thank you very much. Any more questions? Facebook message us, email us here at the fort, and we'd love to have you guys come on out and see us sometime. Thank you very much. Have a good night.
Thank you, everyone. Be sure you look up Fort Sisseton State Park and the Osher Lifelong Learning Institute at the University of South Dakota. We'll see you all soon. Thanks for coming tonight.
Bye.